You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys. This is the Air Raid Hour presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. And tonight, our main focus is going to be on the top 10 Buffalo Bills players not named Josh Allen. So as we go through this evening, make sure you're following along in the comments section and you're giving your own top 10. You're sharing your opinions of our top 10, what you think, and obviously adding and contributing all the feedback that you guys normally contribute over the course of the show. And we'll be popping things up on the screen as we go. But first, I feel like we're obligated to maybe talk about the Stefon Diggs stuff because, Dave, I don't know if you know this, we're the only Buffalo Bills podcast that has not talked about it because all of that drama started percolating Tuesday morning after we went off the air on Monday night. But it's kind of funny. Stefon Diggs tweeted today, LOL, now y'all just saying anything. This was a day after a report from Ben Violin of the Boston Globe suggesting that Stefon Diggs' issues were with his role and input in Ken Dorsey's offense, and only about 7-8 hours after Ryan O'Halloran of the Buffalo News hit send on an article where he spent a whole 2 paragraphs just making up what he thinks Diggs could possibly be mad about, and then closed with the line, well, if he spoke to reporters and cleared the air, we wouldn't have to speculate. So my question to you, Dave, is do these guys just need to shut up if they don't know anything? Or does Stefon Diggs owe the fans and the media an explanation?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. I don't think Diggs really owes anything. I mean, he's going to get asked about it, and like in my opinion, and this is just conjecture, just like what these guys are doing, and that's my opinion on what they're doing, is that McDermott, I think with what he stated about how he sort of said that he had, excused Stefon Diggs from practice, even though the day before said he was concerned. I think maybe there were some emotions running high the day before, but I also think then that day after, you can say what you want about Sean McDermott, but I think he was kind of like having the back of his player in that situation and maybe putting the heat a little bit more on himself than he wanted to put on Diggs himself. And I think in a weird way, it was actually like kind of maybe a falling on the sword, like obviously not severe, but he did, I think, McDermott fall on the sword a bit by making that statement, kind of putting it on him. As far as Stefon Diggs' role in the offense, 211 catches over the last 2 years. And I mean, he may have input, and I'm sure Josh is going to have input as well, like to get him the ball maybe in more advantageous situations, but you can't argue with the pure statistics that he's been putting up since he's been with the Bills, whether it was with Brian Daboll or Ken Dorsey last year. So maybe there's some certain wrinkles, but like as far as what these guys have been stating, if you actually, they did the job, right? They got people to click on their articles, and I think that's ultimately what it was for. In reality, it's really all conjecture without like there's no real reporting there, right? In my opinion. So I think to me, this is just a summertime story. And that's kind of how I view it. Like
if it was September, this wouldn't be a story.
Right. I mean, this is a summertime story. You like got high profile names that are receivers have gone through, not necessarily exactly the same, but there was a couple years ago where Devontae Adams was going through the thing with Aaron Rodgers, and there was Tyreek Hill situation whether he was going to remain with the Chiefs or not. And like there's always not drama, but there's always just a little bit more juice to these stories around some of these flashy wide receivers. And not saying Diggs is flashy, but one thing I will say, there's no questioning when he gets on the football field where his intentions are, where his emotions are, what he wants. He wants to win. And it's okay to have emotion. Like we try to put these guys in a box too often and hold them to these unrealistic standards that we're not even holding ourselves to. So
Mhm.
For me, it's a summertime story. I'm not reading too much into it. He's back, and that's all I'll say about it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there are some people who absolutely love it. They can make all the graphics in the world. They can write their articles, and instead of having to, go out and find sources and, put in some actual work, all they got to do is be like, "Hey, cool. What does my imagination think Stefan Diggs is mad about? I'm going to go write 3 paragraphs about that and then click send." Like that's what's going on right now. Nobody knows what the rift is between the Buffalo Bills and Stefan Diggs. No one knows what it is they're working through. Nobody knows what the issue is except for the people in that room. Everyone else is
Right.
just speculating. So unless the Buffalo Bills make the decision to come out and say what's going on, or Stefan Diggs makes the decision to sit down with somebody and explain what's going on, this is just a workplace disagreement between very competitive people who are trying to win a Super Bowl. And as much as
Mhm.
we want to know, I don't think we're necessarily privileged to know that information. Well, we're the ones who buy the gears and the tickets. Like, I get that. Like, cool. But guess what? We also get to watch them go out and score touchdowns on Sunday. That's what we buy the tickets and the gear for, not to know the ins and outs of how and what happens on the field, or how the product gets created going onto the field. So that's pretty much all I want to say about the Stefan Diggs story. We could go on for 25, 35 minutes. I'm sure there are people devoting whole shows to the Stefan Diggs drama. That's not what we're going to do here, because there's not the substantive information available to have that type of conversation. So tonight what we're going to do is, we do this every offseason. This is a fun show. We're going to rank our top 10 players not named Josh Allen, because clearly, he's number one. If
Mhm.
you're making a top 10 anything list of the Buffalo Bills that doesn't include the word worst in it, I can't believe you would make that list without Josh Allen in it. He is the Buffalo Bills. So the top 10 Bills players not named Josh Allen, who will be key to the Buffalo Bills' success in the year 2023. But before we do that, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, before we get to our top 10 list, and there's already some people coming in with the top 10 lists of their own, and we're gonna slow roll ours out. So I see people just copying and pasting their whole 10. We're gonna go one at a time. So like, make sure when you're at home, whether it's in your notes app or on your notebook, wherever you're keeping this, we're gonna go one at a time, and we'll read off some ones one at a time and make sure there's some reasoning to it as well, and we can project it on the screen. But before we get into our top 10 list, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was, we wanted to talk about our players who didn't make the cut, because I don't know about
Mhm.
you, but this was a difficult process.
Very tough. Very
There,
difficult.
there were
Yes.
some players going into this where I was like, that guy needs to be in my top 10. I
Mhm.
need to put him in my top 10. And then I made the list and I'm like, all right, I got to move him out, even though before I
Mhm.
went into this thought experiment, oh, he's got to be in my top 10. So I want to start with a question for you. And that
Mhm.
first question is how many players in your top 10, without naming them, are skill position players, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers?
Let's see. Uh, Running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. I've got 3.
3. I have 1, and I felt awful after making my list and only having 1 skill position player in there. But some of my guys
I
who missed
cheated a little though. I did cheat a little,
the
as we
s
always tend to bend the rules a little bit for these things. So.
some of my guys who missed the cut include James Cook, Gabriel Davis, and Dalton Kincaid. And I will say that this is the biggest regret of my top 10, the lack of offensive players and sort of weapons on my list. And I feel like sort of a hypocrite, because all off season I was like, we need to be all in on the offense. We need to score as many points as possible. But I'm not saying the Buffalo Bills aren't all in on that philosophy, but I think they're approaching it in maybe a different way than I would have expected, because to me, at least right now, it looks like it's going to be a platoon outside of Stefan Diggs, a number of guys mixing and matching, maybe mixing your personnel, mixing your packages, etc. It's not exactly like there's a D hop across from Stefan Diggs. So I struggled to put anyone outside of Stefan Diggs in my top 10. but certainly Dalton Kincaid, who did not make my list, I think is definitely going to be on that list in 2024. And hopefully he makes me eat my words. And he is one of the 10 most important Bills in 2023. But what about you? Is there any skill position players who sort of were borderline for you that did not make the cut?
Yeah, so the way I did my list was I had my top 10. I had an honorable mention where I put two guys, and then I had kind of like a snubs list, if you will. And I did have James Cook kind of on my honorable mention just outside the top 10. He did not make my top 10, but he was in my short list of two names that I had on the honorable mention list, so he did not make it.
I mean, it's difficult, right? Like, I often ask myself the question, like, Miles Sanders was a really good back for the Philadelphia Eagles last year. Isaiah Pacheco was a really good back for the Kansas City Chiefs last year, even after the season was over and those guys had quality seasons on the two teams that made it to the Super Bowl. I don't know if their fan bases or the people reporting on those teams would put those guys in the top 10, like, of most important players, because again, and that's why the running back position is being devalued. James Cook can be an insane weapon for the Buffalo Bills this year. He's got home run speed. He can catch the ball out of the backfield like a receiver. He can run he proved last year he can run the ball between the tackles. He can do everything. Now, is his frame, even though his frame looks a little bit bulked up in minicamp, that was one of the exciting things about minicamp. I still think a guy like James Cook is like sort of the icing on the cake, not the cake, right? So it's tough to sort of put him in the top 10. So I'm right there with you as well. Speaking of the cake, right? The guys blocking for James Cook, the big uglies, right? The offensive line. This is another thing where we spent the entire offseason talking about the importance of fixing what was in front of Josh Allen. How many offensive linemen cracked your top 10?
Only one, and I had one in the honorable mention. So I did only have one offensive lineman in the top 10. I did have one in the honorable mention and another one in the snubs, because he probably is a snub for the way I thought about this thought exercise was like top 10 most important to the Bills' success, including a playoff run and Super Bowl run. I thought of it in totality. I considered likely opponents in that playoff run in my sort of thought process as well. So I had one on the list, one honorable mention, and one I'll call as a snub that didn't make the list.
So you want to save your honorable mention and your snubs for later on in the show, or do you want to sort of reveal them now?
I don't know if you did it or not, but I did. I can give you my snubs,
because this is sort of the snub honorable mention segment here.
Yes,
and then we're gonna get to our list. So maybe you just want to roll with them now. Explain who you had in those two spots.
Yeah, so I obviously mentioned James Cook. Obviously, was one of my honorable mentions. The other honorable mention is going to maybe come as a surprise, but as a most important to the Bills' success, I did have Spencer Brown as an honorable mention, because I thought in my process, the Bills really did a good job at shoring up the interior. They have good depth at the interior. I wanted to put kind of Mitch Morse there as well. He's not the one that made my list, by the way, but they do have a Ryan Bates there sort of in tow. So I did consider depth at positions where I was considering the importance of the success. So Spencer Brown to me was the honorable mention. And then in my snubs, I had Ed Oliver, I had Greg Rousseau, and I had Kaiir Elam in my snubs list. And I hate to put those guys there. And some people will probably argue that, a guy like Kaiir Elam should be more important than Trey White. Not to reveal too much here, but I just couldn't put him there given the Bills platoon with Benford, Elam and Dane Jackson. So for me, my snubs were Rousseau, Ed Oliver, and Kaiir Elam.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like a lot of people sort of were on Twitter today when I posted like, hey, who are your top 10 Buffalo Bills? And I can't tell you how many times I read the line, all 5 starting offensive linemen. Like that was in almost every single person's top 10 list. And some people listed 9 guys and then put as their 10th guy, the O-line. I'm like, that's cheating. That's 14 guys. You can't do that. Only we're allowed to cheat in these thought exercises. But I feel people when they say that, right? But to me, I had Spencer Brown and I had Mitch Morse sort of like you, sort of honorable mentions.
Yep.
And in the case of Spencer Brown, maybe he clicks, maybe he doesn't, right? But I feel like every good team has weak links, specifically on the offensive line. Those weak links just can't be liabilities. If Spencer Brown becomes a top 10 Buffalo Bill, awesome. That's amazing. He's certainly got the athletic profile and the athletic ceiling for it. But to me, Spencer Brown just has to be average. Like, if he's just average, like, that's fine. And that's not a liability, especially at the right tackle position. If he can just be average and some of the other guys can be good, we can live with that, especially with Josh Allen at your quarterback. So maybe I am overcompensating because Josh Allen is so good at escaping cluttered pockets. Maybe I am. And maybe I'm a hypocrite because I spent the whole offseason talking about how important it was to rebuild the offensive line, which the Bills did. And now I don't have most of these guys on my list. And maybe I am a hypocrite because I spent all season talking about adding playmakers, and the Bills did, and I didn't put any of them on my list. Like, maybe I'm a freaking hip. Maybe I need to reassess my core values. But
well, I think what it's highlighting, and like, there's some great lists that have been put in the comment section.
Yeah,
this team is stacked with very, very good players, and when you think about it just on the surface, you're like, oh, top 10 most important players to the team. Like, that's easy to do. I'll just name 10. It's like, it's not that easy to do for this team. Like, for some teams, it's probably pretty easy to name like 10 to 12 like guys, and it's pretty clear. For this team, it's not that easy. And we're excluding Josh Allen from this as well. So think how hard it would have been if we had him on the list and only had to pick 9 guys, really. So it's tough.
Looking at what you've said so far, because we haven't shared our list with each other. Looking at what you've said so far and what I've said so far, I think we're going to have some pretty contradicting lists. So I think this is going to be very interesting. But before we get started, you mentioned a couple of the guys that you had as snubs, guys like Gregory Rousseau. How many players in your top 10 were defensive players?
Defense, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 10 were defense.
I did too, and I felt really bad about it. Again, maybe I am just an absolute hypocrite. The three most difficult names to leave off the list for me, and you mentioned the 3 that were hard to leave off for you. It was tough for me to leave Leonard Floyd off the list because I think he can be a very integral part to a championship caliber football team. It was tough for me to leave Kyer Elam off the list, mostly because I want him to be on this list. Yes. I want him to be good enough to be on this list. And I left for the first time in the 3 years we've done this exercise. I left Micah Hyde off the list this year. So that one was tough. I mean, for me, Leonard Floyd is sort of like the icing on the cake, not the cake. That's always been my view with him. He's going to be like that extra helping that gets us over the top. I don't know if he's going to be the core of what gets us over the top. That's why he couldn't crack my top 10 list. Kyer Elam, I looked at the Eagles last year with Darius Slay and James Bradbury, and I'd be like, man, what if Kyer Elam can like really click this year and Trey White can get back healthy and we can have 2 dominating boundary corners? That would be so much fun. But again, that's more projecting and me wanting him to be top 10 than him actually maybe being top 10. We still see him at OTAs splitting reps with Christian Benford and Dane Jackson, and all the beat reporters saying Dane Jackson's still got the leg up in this race for CB2. And then Micah Hyde coming back from that neck injury, man. I just want him to be okay. I want him to be a solid center fielder, and I need the other guy playing opposite him to be sort of the guy that is my top 10 player on this football team in Jordan Poyer. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but any thoughts on that?
I love Floyd. I love Floyd. The more time goes on, the more I feel like this is just a home run. And like we talked about this briefly in the last show, Connor McGovern was kind of the big early in free agency sort of signing. I'll call it big for us, right? Top dollars that we gave out in free agency for us as a team. But Leonard Floyd could end up being the most impactful. And when we look back at this season, I said this last show, he could be the one that we look back and say, that was the signing that put the Bills over the top. If he can be in that rotation with Vaughn and Rousseau, assuming Vaughn's back sooner rather than later, having that 3-man rotation and having Epinesa and guys like Basham as your 4th and 5th guys through, man, that could be really nice.
All right. My last question to you before we get to this top 10 list, how many of your top 10 are players that were selected in the first 2 rounds by the Buffalo Bills?
First two, three?
First 3 rounds.
No, 3 players selected in the first 2
okay.
rounds.
Yeah, I got 5 on my list, plus Josh Allen makes 6 out of 11,
Yeah.
which I think is pretty good.
Yep.
Again, a lot of people want to sort of
Let me fact check myself here.
Yeah. A lot of people
Yeah.
sort of want to like rip on Brandon Bean, and yes, maybe some players haven't like contributed the way we like, but I still think they're core integral members of this football team. And that's 6 guys, including Josh Allen, with James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, Spencer Brown, and Kyrie Elam not even making my list. And those are guys that I really want them. Cook, Kincaid, Brown, and Elam. I want to confidently put them in my top 10 next year. That's what I'm really hoping for this season. Outside of obviously the Buffalo Bills winning a Super Bowl and becoming the best team in the NFL and Josh Allen winning MVP and all those things that fans want, I want some of these young, highly drafted players to start hitting their ceiling this year. That's what I'm going to be, I think, looking forward to the most is which of these players can get to their ceilings, which players can get to their ceilings quickly and contribute in helping this Buffalo Bills team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a fun discussion we had on Gregory Rousseau about like what his ceiling could be. And he's already got established himself with such a nice floor that I don't know if the expectations are going to be unfair on him this year to take like some monumental leap, or if it's kind of like if we see like a little bit of improvement from him that we're going to be good with it because he's already established such a nice floor for himself as a late first rounder. So that'll be an interesting one, especially, and Elam obviously being the other big one.
All right, so let's get into it. Our top 10 most important Buffalo Bills to the success of the football team in 2023, not named Josh Allen. We're going to start at 10 and we're going to work our way down. So in the comment section, start with 10 as well. Tell us what you think is your 10th most important player, not named Josh Allen, and why. And we'll put up some of your reasonings onto the screen as we go along here. Dave, who was your 10th most important Buffalo Bill, not named Josh Allen?
Yep, and this is the one where I bent the rules slightly, but I did say Dalton Kincaid number 10. And I did put a / Dawson Knox. And I think what I did there was, obviously the Bills traded up for Dalton Kincaid this year. Rookie tight ends, obviously the numbers statistically, historically are not a super productive from a yardage catches standpoint. Rookie tight ends, just like the trend is that they're not going to put up huge numbers as rookies. But I think in spots and in meaningful situations, Dalton Kincaid can be a difference maker for this team. And I put / Dawson Knox because I think this becomes more of a Ken Dorsey kind of build upon what we saw towards the end of last season, where we started seeing it more sort of after that Lions Thanksgiving game, the tight end and specifically Dawson Knox being utilized more in the offense. We were all yelling about it the first half of the season. And now the Bills go up and they trade up right ahead of Dallas and they draft Dalton Kincaid, a quote weapon, right? And it was like one of those picks that like certainly grew on a lot of people over the course of the draft process and how the draft played out. There is pressure on him. There is pressure on Dawson Knox with that contract to also produce this year. I think Dawson Knox maybe even having a little chip on his shoulder this year with the Bills drafting Dalton Kincaid in the first round. But I'm going to say to really maximize this offense, that tight end position and Dalton Kincaid need to make an impact this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I said, it physically pained me not to put a second skill position player in the top 10, because if you think about it, the easiest way to get the ball to Stephon Diggs more is to take coverages away from Stephon Diggs so he can get more open. So defensive coordinators can't spend as much time focusing on him. So defensive backs don't spend as much time focusing on him. How do you do that? Somebody else steps up and is a guy that you have to worry about. The Buffalo Bills quite simply did not have that last year. So whether it's Gabriel Davis on a healthy ankle, whether it's Dalton Kincaid, whether it's Deontay Hardy, whether it is James Cook, the easiest way for Stephon Diggs to get more free, to get what he wants, is for one of those dudes to step up and become a second alpha. The other option, which is I think the route the Buffalo Bills are taking at least in 2024, and the reason why I didn't have those second skill position players on my list is because I think they're going more for a platoon effect. Well, this
Probably.
week it'll be Dalton Kincaid. This week it'll be Gabriel Davis. This week it'll be James Cook. Like, it's going to be a smorgasbord of dudes. I don't necessarily agree with what the Buffalo Bills decided to do. And who knows, maybe Dalton Kincaid just steps up and is an absolute alpha from the second he steps on the field. And what I'm saying is moot, meaningless, because the Buffalo Bills scouted that position so well. But it'll be really interesting to see where the Buffalo Bills go. A couple of people came in the comment sections. They said Tyler Bass, and I hate doing this, but I'm putting a special teamer at number 10, and I'm going with the Bills kicker of the present and the future, signing that
I like
4-year,
it.
$20 million
I
extension.
don't have a problem with it at all.
I think that you can't have a drop off at this position. You can't sign your contract. You know kickers. They run hot and cold.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can't sign this extension and then get cold if you're Tyler Bass. We're playing Aaron Rodgers and the Jets twice a year. We're playing the Dolphins twice a year. We're playing Joe Burrow and the Bengals. We're playing the Eagles. We're playing the Cowboys. We're playing the Chiefs. We have an absolute gauntlet of a schedule. Points will be at a premium. If we're missing extra points, that's going to throw off our team's rhythm at during some key important games. So he's got to knock down all his extra points. He hasn't had an issue so far. And honestly, as good as our offense is and as capable of our offense is, and as good as I think our defense can be, listen, it's the NFL. Nobody's perfect. The Buffalo Bills aren't going to drop 40 every week. There might be a game or two this year where Tyler Bass is asked to line up with 6 seconds left and kick a game-winning field goal. That might happen more than once this year, which is not something that I really like. I'd have to go back and check. Has Tyler Bass ever kicked a game-winning field, like clock expiring type of game-winning field goal? I don't know. I know he's won us some games in the past, kicking a ton of field goals. I know he's had some nice clutch fourth quarter field goals. I don't know if he's ever won a game like a walk-off. Tyler Bass might have to walk us off.
I don't recall a walk-off.
Yeah.
I don't recall one.
He might have to walk us off once or twice this year. And those games are going to be important because it goes.
Was that Dolphins game last year a walk-off? The regular season one, the late regular season one? Was that a walk-off?
Oh, yeah, that might have been. He chipped it from the goal line, but
yeah, I think that might have been a walk-off.
Yeah, that was a walk-off. So I take it back. He's got one. He might have to walk off a couple of games this year, and he might have to do it from a little bit more of a distance than he did against Miami. So to me, if Tyler Bass can win you a game here, a game there, or in the postseason, listen, I'm not going to bring up what happened in 1990, but sometimes kickers are very important to winning your team championship games. So Thanksgiving was a walk-off as well. So there we go. There was two. I'm losing my mind, but so twice last year, and he's going to have to do it again. Right. So that'll be really interesting to look out for. All right. How about your number 9 player?
Number 9, a guy that the Cover One guys all love, Eric. Everybody, the film guys love him. He's been really good for us, and it's been really apparent when he's not been in the lineup how much we've suffered. Now, I had thought about not putting him on my list this year just because of the acquisition of Poona Ford, but I didn't do that yet because Poona Ford hasn't played a snap yet for the Bills, so I don't really know what the fair expectations are for him. But Daquan Jones for me is number 9. We know going back to the Star days how important this starting one tech position is for the Bills to set the table for the rest of the levels of the defense, especially given how green the linebackers are going to be behind Daquan Jones and Al Oliver this year outside of Matt Milano, guys like Dorian Williams, guys like Terrell Bernard, whoever. Like Daquan Jones is going to have to play at a very high level this year. And we saw what happened. And we always look back to that Bengals game last year where he did not play. And I know our viewers and all the people in this comment section do really appreciate Daquan Jones, but I think still widely around the league and people that nationally talk about the Bills don't really look at him as that sort of difference making guy because he's really more of a run stuffer, but he is really important to this team. And so for those reasons, I have him as number 9 on my list.
Yeah, on social media today, on Twitter, when I posted like top 10 most important bills, a lot of people put Daquan Jones / Poona Ford, and I'm with you, right? Whether it's Daquan Jones or Daquan Jones, combination of Daquan Jones, Poona Ford, they're sort of the substance, right? And it's kind of funny that you had them as your number 9 because I chose I chose to keep both of them off of my top 10 list, as awful as that sounds, because Jessica at tennis says too low for Jones. I know that the Buffalo Bills did not look great when Daquan Jones was off the field this year, but now they have Daquan Jones and Poona Ford. I feel like those guys do the ugly work, and I need my number 9 to take advantage of the ugly work that Poona Ford and Daquan Jones are doing. And I need this guy with his new 4-year, $68 million extension to
Mm,
make some flashier plays and have more of an impact on the game this year. My number 9, this is more of a fingers crossed. He needs to reach his ceiling if the Buffalo Bills are ever going to, win that Lombardi. I put Ed Oliver as my number 9. He needs to stay healthy
hmm
and he needs to be a plus disruptor. He needs to be able to impact a game with or without Von Miller. I think in order to win a Super Bowl, you need to have a dominant interior disruptor. And as much as Daquan Jones and Poona Ford help Ed Oliver, it's Ed Oliver's impact that is going to be what puts us over the top. So I go with Ed Oliver here.
I
I
like your reasoning
need
there.
I need that finish there. I feel like all the good teams have that interior disruptor, Chris Jones, right? Aaron Donald. Like the last 2 Super Bowl champions have had that interior disruptor. I'm not saying Ed Oliver has to be Chris Jones or Aaron Donald, but if Daquan Jones, Poona Ford can make their lives easier, I think that Ed Oliver's just got to have more of an impact from the interior, finish some of those sacks, put up some better box score numbers, etc. Some of the things, the flashier things that fans want to see, put it all together on a consistent basis. And the Buffalo Bills want to win that Super Bowl because that's obviously the ultimate goal. All right, your number 8.
My number 8 sounds like it's a guy who is not on your list, and for me, that is Gabriel Davis this year. And the reason I have Gabriel Davis here at number 8 because I do like the Deontay Hardy signing. I do like the Trent
Mm-hmm.
Sherfield signing. We still have Khalil Shakir. Um, obviously we drafted Justin Shorter, but I think from my vantage point, he's still very much the
Mm-hmm.
far and away number 2 wide receiver on this team. Whether or not you have high hopes for some of these other guys, I know there are a lot of Khalil Shakir fans. That's great, but Gabriel Davis needs to be that. I think that third guy, right, or second guy, whether it's Diggs, Kincaid, and Davis, or Diggs, Knox, and Davis. Like I think he needs to be that sort of
Mm-hmm.
triple, the triplet of that group to be that guy that can be that downfield threat, can be the guy we've seen flashes of in many games over the course of his career, making big plays. Um, he's never going to be the most efficient receiver, but I think there were times, I think last year, where we saw some of the drops and we saw situations where we felt like he could have come up with a play, to help the Bills in
Mm-hmm.
certain games. And it's not fair necessarily to put that on him, but he's important to this team's success one way or another in 2023. And by the way, playing for a contract in 2024, whether it's with the
Mm-hmm.
Bills or otherwise, Gabriel Davis is going to put his best foot forward in 2023. And to me, he is really important to this team's success this year.
You're pulling the Von Miller here in your top 10. You're trying to manifest the playmakers, Dalton Kincaid, Gabriel Davis. I like that. Keep manifesting, keep that positive attitude. As I stated previously, like I said, I feel like a traitor to my own beliefs because I kept those guys off of my list. At number 8, I went with the Snowman. I went with Dion Dawkins. It's an old adage, but it's a timeless adage. You need to protect the quarterback's blind side. Again, I looked at the last 2 Super Bowls because that's all that I have the attention span to look back at. Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle, Andrew Whitworth at left tackle. Having these franchise left tackles, these cornerstone left tackles matter. Despite Josh Allen being good at buying time, eluding pressure, I think Dion Dawkins needs to get back to his 2021 form more than sort of the sloppy, inconsistent 2022 Deion Dawkins that we saw. I think if Allen was less elusive than he is, Deion Dawkins would be higher on this list. But because Josh Allen is so good at creating time for himself, for extending pockets, extending plays, I think the left tackle can be a little bit lower on a list than maybe some other teams' lists. And I have Deion Dawkins as my number 8. All right. And we got a great comment from Dennis K. He says, hey, in the past, Gabriel Davis has made those plays. Look at that Indianapolis wild card game.
Yeah.
So that's a really
He's
good
got
point
it in
there.
him. He's got it in him.
Number 7. Who do you got with your number 7 spot here?
Yeah, so number 7, I think, is another guy who maybe didn't make your list, but I think, judging by the archetypes we have in this position group, and judging by what we really felt and I think hurt without him last year playing center field, number 7 on my list this year is Micah Hyde. Obviously, we thought that there was a good chance he was going to come back in that deep play if we made a deep playoff run. The Bills safety group right now consists of guys like Jordan Poyer, Taylor Rapp, DeMar Hamlin, Dean Marlowe, and then Micah Hyde to me is really the only real true center fielder, I think, of the bunch, and just the communication from him being there, the steadiness. We saw that amazing play he made a couple years ago in that Pats playoff game that really changed the entire tide of that game. The Pats had converted a couple third downs going down the field in that drive, and Micah Hyde just made an incredible play to kind of really shift the tide of that entire game. And I think that with him coming back this year, and him really looking like he was, going to be pretty ready to go by the end of last season, gives me hope that this year he will be that guy that he's been for the Bills all of these years, and potentially maybe his last year playing in the NFL. We don't know, right, what's going to happen with Micah Hyde beyond 2023. So I think he's going to play with a lot of heart this year. There's going to be a lot of emotion from Micah Hyde, more so maybe than we've even seen in the past. And him being really the only true center fielder, I think, especially, like I said, my thought experiment in thinking ahead to the playoff games against the likes of Cincinnati and Kansas City, a guy like Micah Hyde is going to be really important to have on the field in those moments. And so for those reasons, I have him number 7 on my list.
Yeah, it was tough to leave him off my list because him and Jordan Poyer have always been so inseparable. And I was trying not to be a cheater this year and just combining the two into one person, like I believe we've probably done in years past. But RJ Melville comes in and says, was last year just everyone having their worst seasons outside of Milano all at the same time? And then Spin coming in with a great follow-up comment. Last year, everyone was just getting injured. Yeah, so it was one of those years where the expectations were so high and you thought like, well, this is the team. This is it. This is it. This is it. And then just adversity struck at every step of the way and in every way imaginable. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough to overcome. And again, it's another old adage, but it's true. Sometimes there's just some luck involved in winning some of these things. And one of the goals is just to be good enough to give yourself a chance to get lucky, right? And the Buffalo Bills have consistently been good enough to give themselves a chance to get lucky. They just haven't gotten lucky yet. My number 7 is my surprise pick.
Okay.
And it's a surprise pick because this guy might not even start for the Buffalo Bills, at least to start the season. But if he doesn't, I will be mad because this guy should be a plug and play day one starter. At number 7, I'm going with right guard Osiris Torrance.
I like that.
Christian Wilkins, Quinnen Williams, Chris Jones. The list goes on of these interior disruptors, these bullies that just give the Buffalo Bills a hard time, especially in the postseason, year after year after year. So to me, that's what Osiris Torrance needs to be. He needs to be your interior disruptor stopper. On top of being sort of a more powerful base in pass protection, I also think a guy like Osiris Torrance, if he can develop quickly, is one of those guys you can single-handedly get the run game going. Right? Oh, just go run it behind Osiris. He's going to push. He's going to push some guys back. So the combination of just having a more powerful base, a more powerful anchor against some of these interior disruptors, which is an issue I think we've had in the past, especially with Mitch Morse being 6'6" and maybe getting a little out leveraged by some guys. I think, again, he has to develop into it. He needs to be on the field in order to develop into it. But I really do think, I know he's just a second round pick, but like, I really do think like Osiris Torrance, we could look back at the end of the season and be like, that guy was one of the biggest differences between 2023 and 2022. I really do think that Osiris Torrance can be that guy when all is said and done. All right, Dave, what is your number 6 choice of your top 10 Bills? Important to the success of the team in 2023, not named Josh Allen.
Yeah, some parallels here to the Micah Hyde, but not entirely, right? But a guy that was coming back from injury last year, first real major injury of his career, even going back to college. One of the only 3 guys on my list that were Bills' top first or second round draft picks was the Bills' first draft pick under Sean McDermott, and that's Trey White. He is my number 6 most important Bill to 2023, and the reason I put him over a guy like Kaiir Elam or any of the other corners is because those guys are going to be battling out for number 2, and that's fine. And I think that competition is really going to lend itself to, not that position isn't as important, but I'll feel okay kind of no matter really how that shakes out. Obviously, I want it to be Kaiir, but Trey White, kind of the forgotten man a little bit, right? Like a couple years ago, we were talking about Trey White as one of the best corners in the NFL. He still can be, but he's got to work himself back to that conversation now, right? And I think another year removed from that injury, getting over those mental hurdles, which again, this is my speculation, just seemed like there was a lot of mental baggage of that came along with that injury for Trey White and him getting back on the field and now trusting that knee, getting back to that guy. I'm not saying he's ever going to be like a top 3 corner in the league again, but he can be at times and he can be in spurts and he can still be a top 10 to top 5, maybe corner in the league if he's back to that form, and he can really set the tone on the boundary and really help this team out. Again, kind of thinking ahead about facing some of these aerial attacks of Cincinnati, Kansas City, even LA Chargers come to mind. Trey White is really important to the success of this team this year. Many people will say, well, the Bills are deep at corner, so it shouldn't matter. But I think that domino effect of him potentially being back to close to, we'll call it Pro Bowl or all pro form can really make a difference for this team in 2023.
My number 6 spot was a guy that I sort of debated whether I was going to keep him in my top 10 or not. And that is former first round pick, Gregory Rousseau, because again, Von Miller, he's sort of your alpha rusher. We don't know if Groot is ever going to be a guy like Von Miller, right? We've talked at length on this show. Groot is a length and strength left end who is going to be really good in run support. And he's going to push double-digit sacks, like that 8 to 12 sack range every single season. That's probably his ceiling, but that's a pretty darn good ceiling for pick number 30 in a COVID draft. That's pretty darn good. But and him and Floyd as auxiliary rushers can still be deadly. But the reason why I included him on this list, why I think he's the cake and not just the icing on the cake, is again, with Miller coming off the torn ACL, I feel like we need to have some more of these defensive linemen, these highly drafted defensive linemen, Ed Oliver, Gregory Rousseau. They need to look in the mirror and say, when Von Miller was out last year, that wasn't good enough. We were drafted in the first round of the National Football League draft. We need to step up and we need to be alphas in our own right. We cannot have a defensive line that was practically useless when Von Miller wasn't on the field. That's not something that we can have again in the year 2023 and be Super Bowl contenders. So I want Gregory Rousseau to match the high end of that ceiling. I want him to have a Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson type of impact from the left side. because he's a little bit different. He's not the bendy guy that Floyd and Miller are of this Buffalo Bills defensive line, and maybe not just be the cleanup man, have an impact in the pass rush in his own right. And I'm hoping that Sean McDermott can unlock that and move him around a little bit, play him a little bit at 0 tech, play him a little bit at 3 tech, move him around. Don't just leave him sitting there at sort of the left end spot. So it'll be interesting to see how Gregory Rousseau is deployed in 2023 and whether he can live up to that number 6 billing. You left him off your list, and I don't disagree with that because, again, he can be a very, very good auxiliary player, but I just think if the Buffalo Bills want to get over the hump this year, he needs to be more than a really, really good auxiliary player. You're number 5.
Number 5 for me is a guy who's had 22 interceptions for the Bills in 5 seasons with the Bills. He's been an All-Pro. He's came back to the Bills unexpectedly, I would say, after what maybe was a quieter market for his services, and a surprise and a welcome back, like roll out the red carpet for him to come back player, and that's Jordan Poyer, number 5. He is now obviously with Tremaine gone. Jordan Poyer is the heart of this defense, right? I mean, I don't think there's any two ways about it, right? Von Miller is the guy, but like Jordan Poyer is a Bill, right? Like Von Miller is here and he is a Bill, but Jordan Poyer is a Buffalo Bill, and he spent 5 seasons here. He's made play after play. He's been an All-Pro with the Bills. He's really made his career what it is as a Bill, whereas guys like Von Miller have made their careers elsewhere and come here. Jordan Poyer's really made his career in his name and his reputation as an NFL player, and as a guy who knows at some point it's probably not going to happen, but he could be at least in the conversation for the Hall of Fame at some point. Probably won't be. Just so don't come at me in the comment section for saying that. But
Wall of Famer. There we go.
He'll be a Wall of Famer. There we go. And he's really important to this team, and we saw what it meant when he went out last year as well at times. And I think that for him and Hyde to be back together again, I put Poyer ahead of Hyde just because of I think he's made a few more impactful plays over his career, and he has a little bit more of a nose for the ball in both on the back end, not necessarily on the back end, but on the ball and in the run game, and is really just such a heart to this defense that he starts my top 5 at number 5.
Yeah. Well, great minds think alike, because Jordan Poyer is also my number 5 most important Bill outside of Josh Allen. You already mentioned Micah Hyde, who didn't make my list, but he made your list. Healthy. I need him healthy. I need him roaming center field. Poyer needs to get healthy, and we need him to go back to being that menace all over the field. He needs to have his impact felt in coverage. He needs to have his impact felt at the line of scrimmage, and his impact, quite frankly, needs to be felt in the locker room. He's one of the leaders of this football team. You mentioned he's sort of a heart of this defense, a heart and soul kind of guy. He's the guy who makes the play. That's who he's been his entire career here. That's what he needs to continue to be. When the Buffalo Bills need a play, Jordan Poyer is the one who makes it. Was all the statistics going around last year, what the Buffalo Bills record was when Jordan Poyer was and was not playing. He had an interception streak going on for a little while as well. He's sort of getting paid like the guy who's at the tail end of his career, and he still plays really well. He's sort of that savvy veteran, but other youngsters sort of kick up their game and contribute next to him. That's not what Jordan Poyer needs to be if the Buffalo Bills are going to win the Super Bowl. He's not the savvy veteran role player yet. He's still the big dog. He's still the alpha, and he needs to play above the contract that he got paid, right? He probably should have been paid more, because he's gonna, I think, contribute more than $8 million AAV. He is the heart and soul of this defense. He still needs to be that alpha big dog. I know Taylor Rapp is in the fold now, and that's interesting to see how the Buffalo Bills deploy him, but Jordan Poyer is that dude and needs to continue being that dude if the Buffalo Bills are going to hoist the Lombardi next February. All right, you're number 4.
Yeah, this is maybe high for some people, and you've already had him on your list lower, but number 4 for me is the Snowman, Deion Dawkins, and my main thought process behind this was the domino effect that would occur if Deion Dawkins is not in the lineup. And all the kudos, obviously, to Josh Allen for his escapability and what he can do to mask some of the deficiencies we've had in pass protection, with the likes of Spencer Brown, etc. But Deion Dawkins, man, like without him in the lineup, that just sets this domino effect that I don't even want to think about. Bills didn't really truly address tackle in a meaningful way in the offseason, right? They signed guys like Brandon Shell and obviously they brought Questenberry back, but like they're putting a lot of, they're putting a lot of stock into Spencer Brown really being that right tackle. They obviously are expecting Deion Dawkins to be a 16 plus game starter for them, and as they should, but it's razor thin behind Deion Dawkins and what happens at that tackle position if something happens to him. And he still probably doesn't get as much credit as he should as a pass protector. He's not he's not an elite left tackle, right? Like he's an above average left tackle. He's great for this team. He's great for what he is. He's maybe a top 10, I'll give him, left tackle in the league, which is great. That's fine. The Bills need that, but he is super important to this team, and the Bills need him for every single game this year if they want to win the Super Bowl. That's how I feel about Deion Dawkins.
Yeah, that Thursday night football game against New England, like you just saw the Buffalo Bills. And I know Questenberry was also hurt and it was a short week. So there are other things that contributed to it. But to just see like the Buffalo Bills just essentially just in survival mode without Deion Dawkins was difficult to watch that game in Foxborough. Jessica Tennis comes in at number 4 and she says Matt Milano. And the reason why I put that one up on the screen is because it's my number 4 as well. I'm going with Matt Milano, who could be taking on some more Mike Milano type of role in the Buffalo Bills defense. I don't think he's going to be a full-time Mike, but I think, and, guys like Eric and Anthony have been showing some clips. There were times last year when Matt Milano shifted over and he was the one in the A gap. He was the one in the B gap, working the middle of the football field for the Buffalo Bills defense, especially in some of these blitzing situations. Maybe the Buffalo Bills get a little bit more chess piece, a little bit more versatile with their linebacking core, get a little bit more creative in 2023. And I think that with no Tremaine Edmonds, you could see Milano step up and have to wear the green dot. That could be something that we're going to have to keep an eye on in training camp. Who's the one calling the defensive plays? Matt Milano would make sense. Hyde, Poyer would also make sense in that regard. Again, are we going to see a more aggressive defense under Sean McDermott? That could honestly play into Matt Milano's hands. The guy's an absolute freaking menace on the football field. An absolute menace. Like just his burst, his acceleration, his stop and start ability, it's insane. I legitimately think that if Poona Ford and Daquan Jones are eating up dudes, if Leonard Floyd and Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and Von Miller are rushing the passer effectively, if Jordan Phillips comes back healthy, if Ed Oliver is able to contribute because of all those other guys contributing around him, if the front 4 and that rotation in the front 4 is as menacing as we think they can be, and Sean McDermott is more aggressive, I think you could see a more souped up version of Matt Milano in 2023, if you can believe that to be humanly possible, because I think he could be put into a position to make a ton of game breaking plays. And Dr. Brian Adams comes in and says, I'm all for the amoeba fronts. Yeah. Like the Buffalo Bills defense has the ability, has the dogs to confuse opposing offenses, to give them different looks, to put guys like Matt Milano in positions to make plays. He's just got to make sure when the ball hits him in the chest, he's got to catch those pick sixes this year. We know in Tennessee, against Tennessee, he dropped one. So Matt Milano is a former All-Pro, a recent former All-Pro, one of the best linebackers in the business. And I think you could see his best football still be in front of him because of all the auxiliary talent around him. That's why he's number 4. But I think he's one of the most important players to the Buffalo Bills' success in 2023.
And let's just segue right into it. He's my number 3. So for many of the same reasons you mentioned, really all of the reasons you mentioned, I think that it will be interesting to see, not that he was really in Tremaine Edmonds' shadow, because that's not really a fair way to label Matt Milano. He was obviously an All-Pro, but is he going to be the green dot? Like you said, he's going to now be the face of that linebacking core, whereas previously he was probably the face maybe for half of Bills Mafia, Tremaine Edmonds the other half, but like there's no doubt about it. He is the face of the linebacking core now, front and center, and he's got a lot of green guys behind him. He's got guys like Terrell Bernard and Dorian. Like Matt Milano is shouldering the load of that linebacking group this year, and there is a lot of pressure, I think, on Matt Milano to perform this year. Not that I expect him not to, but like you said, with Sean McDermott's style, will that play into Matt Milano's strengths a bit more? If that's the case, then we could see a very special season from him. But regardless, it's super important for the Bills to get a great season. Adam Milano needs to be sure tackling, needs to contribute in multiple ways, rushing, defending the run, whatever, coverage, everything, right? It's going to be, there's going to be a lot on him this year. And I think for that reason, he's number 3 on my list because of just all of those things and how great of a player he is, but also what's behind him. And that thought scares me a bit.
Yeah, you're right. Like a creepy thought just crept into my head, right? Like, what if Dorian Williams, what if Terrell Bernard, what if those guys are lost? What if they struggle next to Matt Milano and it sort of drags Matt Milano down with them because he's overcompensating, trying to help them with their reads, trying to help them get to where they need to be, etc. So those sort of negative thoughts are starting to creep into my head. So I'm just going to go back to manifesting those positive thoughts like Von Miller with Matt Milano. But Nikki G coming in with the comment saying AJ Klein via Kyrie Elam. I didn't see those comments, but apparently Kyrie Elam said that AJ Klein has been taking some of the first team snaps at Mike linebacker. And honestly, there's so much talent on that front seven of that defense that just made the best man win. And I don't think it was the biggest deal in the Bills Mafia, Twitter, social media, YouTube space for 2 months. Like it engulfed our entire January and engulfed our entire February, engulfed our entire March, right? Like, just what do we do at middle linebacker? And it's funny now that, like, after all of that, this is my take, but it's walk back season, people. My number 3 was a guy that you already mentioned, and that is Trey White. And
I'm glad he's on your list. I was a little worried he wasn't going to be on your list.
My notes here are: we need one. We need one cornerback who quarterbacks need to think twice about. A cornerback that they hesitate to throw to their side. So whether that is Tre'Davious White, 2 years removed from an ACL, or it's the emergence of first-round pick Kyrie Elam, pick one. I need one of those 2 guys to be that dude to limit quarterbacks to one side of the field or make them think twice about looking on their side of the field, because we are playing some very good quarterbacks. Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Tua, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow. Like, the list goes on of quarterbacks that we have to play this year, and any advantage we can get is an important advantage when playing those quarterbacks. And if Trey White can round back into form and make them hesitate to look over at one side of the field, that is a huge, huge advantage for the Buffalo Bills and a leg up for them in some of these games. So Tre'Davious White comes in at number 3 for me. And that leads to number 2 and number 1. It'll be interesting to see. I think we both have the same 2 players, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Remember, this is, if you're tuning in late, 10 players not named Josh Allen.
And we did not share lists ahead of time.
We did not share lists ahead of time. So there are 2 players left that we're probably both going to be Von Miller, Stephon Diggs. I don't know what order we're going to put them in. Who'd you get for number 2?
Number 2, I put Von Miller, number 2. And this is a guy who had 8 sacks in 11 games last year before he got hurt. Coming back from ACL, we know Von's super positive. He's been through an injury like this in the past. I'm not worried about him mentally overcoming the injury. I want Von Miller healthy for the playoffs. I hate to compare him to like LeBron in a different sport, but like LeBron takes games off in the regular season. Like LeBron plays for the playoffs, right? Like, he plays for the playoffs. Like, I'm not saying Von Miller is going to sit all regular season. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I am suggesting that it is very, very important that the Bills have Von Miller this season in the playoffs, ready to roll and going in on a high note at the end of the regular season into the playoffs, because Von Miller shines when the lights are the brightest, and he has his entire career. There's no subjectivity to that. You can objectively look at some of the biggest games he's played in, and he's showed up in almost all of them. Obviously, most recently on that Super Bowl run with the Rams, but did so as well with the Denver Broncos, including important regular season games for them over the many years. So the Bills put a ton of money into investing in Von Miller to be that guy. They went out and signed Leonard Floyd. They have Greg Rousseau on the upswing. They gave Ed Oliver that extension. This Bills defensive line, led by Von Miller when he's back, needs to be that group this year. And they need to be that group that can topple the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert come playoff time. So for me, I put Von Miller number 2.
I have Von Miller number 2 as well, so that's kind of funny. We never shared our list with each other. It was a complete surprise, and only 3 times did we have the same player in the same position. Number 5, Jordan Poyer. Number 2, Von Miller, and number 1 is probably going to end up for the both of us being Stephon Diggs. But for Von Miller, the old adage, we've said it a million times on this show. We've been saying it since the Jerry Hughes days when we were trying to justify Jerry Hughes. Big time players, big time plays, big time games, right? Big time players make big time plays in big time games. Von Miller is the pulse of this defense. Von Miller is the closer. We saw it in Kansas City, getting that pressure on Patrick Mahomes, leading to the Matt Milano sack to sort of end the game. Like that's what we were so excited about. We were so excited to see that in the postseason, and it didn't come about because of that torn ACL in Detroit. So Von Miller comes in at number 2 for me. He's the dude that you want when the lights go on in the postseason. You mentioned you made that analogy with LeBron James. Maybe he gets, he gets a little bit of that rest or whatever during the regular season, but when the lights come on in the playoffs, he's going to be the guy who kicks it to another gear that, like, man, he's already played so well. He's going to kick it to another gear. That's who Von Miller is, and that's what you're going to get in the postseason. But that leads us to our number 1. Spin comes in again. He's not the first person to do this. I've seen it a ton today. The number 1 is the whole offensive line. The offensive line has to play well. Jessica Tans comes in and says number 1, Diggs. Who was your number 1? I'm assuming, like me, it was Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, number 1, Connor McGovern. No, number 1, Stephon Diggs has to be. Look, he is that dude with Josh Allen. The guys are their best friends. They are the dynamic duo.
Are they? Let's spend 15 minutes speculating about what could be wrong.
I'm not gonna speculate, but this is the pairing that will lead the Bills to a Super Bowl, right? I mean, ultimately, this is the pairing that will dominate the regular season, that hopefully dominates the playoffs in the biggest moments of the biggest games on offense. Stephon Diggs needs to be the guy that shows up, and he will. He is a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. Maybe you could tell me he's in the top 3 to 5 wide receivers in the NFL. No questions asked. And he's playing with arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. And for the Bills to hoist the Lombardi, these two need to have a special season and a special postseason run together, I believe. And I think that the fire that Stephon Diggs brings to the field week in and week out, every play, every down, doesn't matter what point in the game it is. He has shown me especially what he's all about when it comes to what he wants to do to win. And I think for a lot of fans, winning the Super Bowl, he's got the mentality and the attitude that we've been needing from a player at that position for a long time. And that's not to discredit guys like Stevie Johnson or others who didn't play on great teams, but like Diggs is that guy, right? He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He is the best non-quarterback player on this team, and he's got to be the most important player outside of Josh Allen.
Yeah, my number 1 is Stephon Diggs as well. The fans wanted D-Hop. The fans wanted another alpha target, not because they didn't believe in Stephon Diggs, because they wanted to take the pressure off of Stephon Diggs. Steve Lynn comes in and says his number 1 would be Coach McDermott. If it was a top 10 list of top 10 things that need to go right for the Buffalo Bills to win a Super Bowl, obviously outside of Josh Allen staying healthy for the entire season, if we weren't putting injuries into this equation, my number one thing would probably be Ken Dorsey develops as an offensive coordinator. I would probably put Ken Dorsey's ability to call offensive plays over Coach McDermott's leadership, Coach McDermott's defensive play calling, Coach McDermott's CEOing, whatever you want to call it. I would honestly put Ken Dorsey's offensive play calling above all of that, because we didn't go get D-Hop, right? The fans wanted D-Hop. We wanted another alpha target. That's the easiest way to take the pressure off Stephon Diggs. We didn't go that route. Maybe in his rookie year, Dalton Kincaid can magically beat Travis Kelce, and all of what I'm about to say is moot, but that's highly unlikely. Maybe a healthy Gabriel Davis can turn into Mike Evans. That's highly unlikely. It's going to be sort of a platoon of a number of intriguing weapons. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Ken Dorsey can do. And it's going to be up to Ken Dorsey to get the pressure off of Stephon Diggs and get the ball into his damn hands, right? Like, you look at it. And again, I have a very short attention span. So I look back at the last two Super Bowl champions. Patrick Mahomes has the wide receiver that he feeds, Travis Kelce, that didn't go away in the playoffs. That's never gone away in the playoffs. Matthew Stafford has the quarterback or the wide receiver that he feeds, Cooper Kupp, that didn't go away in the playoffs. The Buffalo Bills need to continue to feed Stephon Diggs because he's as good as Travis Kelce. He's as good as Cooper Kupp. He's in that echelon of skill position player. And he needs to be that dude, not just in the regular season. He needs to be that dude in the playoffs too. And that's up to Ken Dorsey now to make that happen, because he is the engine. Him and Josh Allen are the engine that drives this offense. So they got to figure it out. There's no D-Hop coming to take the pressure off. It's going to have to be schematic.
It's going to have to be schematic. And this is why I said at the beginning of last year that there was probably pressure on Ken Dorsey that we weren't talking about enough, and just thought, hey, you're getting handed the keys to a Ferrari with Josh Allen, but you still got to know how to drive it, right? And like, there were times where that was questionable, right? And like the Bills still had a very good statistically, proficient offense, whether it's DVOA or raw statistics or whatever you want to look at. But sometimes in big moments, it felt a little flat and it felt a little forced. And so there is pressure on Ken Dorsey, no doubt about it. There's pressure on Ken Dorsey. There's pressure on Sean McDermott taking back the reins on the defense. Like, those top two guys now with no defensive coordinator, McDermott and Dorsey, a lot of pressure on those guys this year. And I'm not saying that McDermott's on the hot, like, I'm not going that far. I'm just saying there is pressure on them. And that pressure has come along with the expectations. So the expectations have created that pressure, and that's what you want, right? You want to be, you want those expectations to be on your team, because that means you have a legitimate chance to win the big one. So I'm with you on that.
RJ Melville comes in and says, Dorsey absolutely terrifies me this year. He was over his head last year. We all saw it. I just hope he can be confident. I think the two most stress-inducing things heading into training camp are going to be Spencer Brown and Ken Dorsey. I don't know. Anything else stress-inducing?
Spencer Brown, stress-inducing to me.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a third thing.
Maybe
middle linebacker.
Middle linebacker, right tackle.
Dane Jackson take the first reps at CB2.
Middle linebacker, right tackle, and then the play calling on offense, probably. Yeah. Like, I'm not worried. Honestly, I'm not stressed if like Kincaid's slow out of the gate. Like, that does not worry me one bit. So I'm sure people will overreact to that if he has a drop or something in like the first day, like, the Bills wasted a bit. No, I'm not gonna worry about that.
Claude Please comes in and says middle linebacker, second cornerback, and Nikki G coming in with some fire. A 2-minute offense isn't an identity. Yeah.
Love that.
Coming in hot to end the air raid hour tonight. But before we head out of here, I always do a tweet of the week, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently today. So we just got done with our top 10 Buffalo Bills, not named Josh Allen. And that was sort of, we do this every offseason. But it was also inspired by our guy, Greg Vorse, over at Cover One. If you head on over to cover1.football, Greg right now is once a week publishing a player not named Josh Allen that's going to be integral to the Buffalo Bills and their success. Last week he did up a really good piece on Damian Harris, and today he dropped his piece on Dalton Kincaid, and it was an awesome piece from start to finish. I highly recommend you read the Harris piece. I highly recommend you read the Dalton Kincaid piece. Head on over to cover1.football. He's got his own top 10 series of his own going on over there, and that's Greg Vorse. You can find him at Greg Vorse over there on the old Twitter which is our social media of choice. You can follow us on the Bills Guys as well. But he's doing some great work, and the guys over at Cover1.football are doing some great work as well, and must read stuff.
Yeah, must read. Those guys, Greg, Chris, Seth, like those guys all do really great work. And, they try to put a different angle on some of these pieces that, sometimes are hard to, in the summer months come up with. But like, there's a very interesting angle on the Dalton Kincaid piece that I'll tease a little bit. It's a really good read. So yeah, head over there and read it. And we'll be pushing it out on social media as well.
Yeah, today was tight end day on the Air Raid Hour account. You can follow us on Twitter at the Bills Guys, and I'm gonna start doing that like every couple of days. I don't have time to be on the social media as much as I used to, but every couple of days I'm designated days to position groups. Like Saturday was wide receiver, and I just talked about wide receivers all day on our Twitter handle. Today was tight ends. I'm probably gonna get to offensive tackle, running back. I'm gonna get to all the different position groups by the time training camp starts. So if you're not following us on Twitter at the Bills Guys, we talk a lot of Buffalo Bills football on there, hence the title. So follow us over there as well. And Dave, any final thoughts before we head out of here this evening?
No, this is always an interesting one, right? Because you kind of see where people are valuing certain positions, certain players, how they're considering depth, how they're considering, like Jessica made some good points about like the cornerback depth, and others like made good points about the defensive tackle depth. But it is a very interesting thing, but it's very difficult. I would say it was not as easy as you might think to put a list like this together.
Yeah, I like RJ Melville coming in saying a new top 10 list, top 10 Bills that will give you an ulcer this year. Spencer Brown is number one. Number one. Can he be 1 through 10?
Number one.
Can he be 1 through 10?
Spencer Brown, number one. Probably God, Boogie Basham. I don't know. He'd probably be like on the list somewhere.
I don't even know if he registers on my radar at this point.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. A couple of note-keeping things before we head out of here. Number one, if you don't know this, you don't have to watch us on YouTube. You can listen to this podcast by heading to Spotify, by heading to Apple. It's not called iTunes anymore. What is it called? Apple Podcasts. There we go. I always get that screwed up. Just type in Air Raid Buffalo, and the audio version of this show is available to you. You can listen to it at the gym, in your car ride, your way to work, wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. So if you're sick of looking at our faces, just want to hear our beautiful, sultry voices, you can do so on the podcast network by searching Air Raid Buffalo. And if you could, the number one way to show us support is to, number one, click that share button, shoot a share to anybody you think would enjoy listening to the show, contributing to the show in the comment section every Monday night at 9 p.m., whether it's a family member, a relative, etc. Just click that little link button, copy the link, text it to it, email it to them. The number one way we want to spread here at the Air Raid Hour is we want to spread via word of mouth, because I think that's the most authentic thing. I don't want to blast out a million promos. I want people to enjoy what they're listening to and share it with and feel the want and the need to share to help us out and contribute. So if you guys could click that share button, share with anyone that you think would enjoy this show, and make sure you come back and leave a comment. That helps with the algorithm as well. So click that like button, leave a comment. All of those things help us grow and move up the old YouTube charts. Right, Dave?
It's the most important thing. And I think that what really makes the difference for us is like we started with nothing, right? I mean, like 3-4 years
all
ago,
13 listeners of our first podcast.
I mean, it was very grassroots. And so we know a lot of people have been listening to us throughout the different networks we've been a part of, and it's not lost on us that you guys have been with us, and obviously the new people listening as well. Like it's really incredible. I never take any of this for granted. So thank you all.
Only Bills Mafia can be 100 deep on a Monday night at 10 p.m. listening to the two of us talk about our top 10 players most important to the Buffalo Bills. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate all the support. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!